I will eventually remember to unmute myself in every game, but not today. Anyway, welcome in to CTL week number 4 between Team Composite and the Killer Pikachus. This is game number 4, our first Platinum level game. The map is GSL Entombed Valley. Spawning up in the upper right-hand position with his team down 0-3. He needs to win in this game to keep his team alive for the weekly win. It is Machination. And spawning across from him in the lower right-hand corner, in the red color, playing for Team Composite, it is Vanek. Vanek's name, if anyone's wondering, comes from a Buffalo Sabres player, very good hockey player, Thomas Vanek, forward, if you really wanted to know. Yeah, that's the big background information I have on Vanek for you. Machination, meanwhile, we've seen come out as the ace for the Killer Pikachus fairly frequently in the past, and it looks like this week they're just changing things up. They've run into a little bit of a tough time. They lost last week 6-1 to Spinal Tap, so maybe changing things up, trying to get a little bit of their mojo back. Again, this is our last cast for week number 4. We'll have week 5 casts coming up in the next couple of days. Team Evolution versus Team Anarchy, I know it's one. I'm actually not sure about the other one. But I will have 2 games for you. And we do see Machination getting up here being foiled by the wall-in. Granted, there's not many hit points on the supply depot, so Vanek needs to be a little bit careful, make sure he doesn't lose that, and there's the SCV going to come and start building that when it has about 14 hit points left on it. So there we go. And then he actually doesn't. Oh, that was close. Vanek likes life on the edge, apparently, but able to keep his supply depot alive and keep the probe out. Now, in case you're wondering, GSL version of Entombed Valley, your opponent can't spawn horizontal to you, but it can spawn vertical and it can spawn cross. We do have cross positions here, and I would tend to say that cross positions favor the Protoss player. This is, I believe, a 53-47 map for this matchup in favor of Protoss, so not the biggest deal. But it is fantastic for Protoss in that they can take 3 pretty easy bases, have them defended, get that maxed out army, and go crush people with it. So we'll see what the plan from our 2 players is. Vanek gets in, spots nothing too weird going on, doesn't actually mineral walk him out of there. But there we go, finally recontrolled, spots everything going on, and is to escape. Maybe. It depends on this zealot in this corner. He is going to maybe get cut off here. There it goes. So Scout SCV lost. Not able to go over to the 3rd base, which is where he wanted to go. Vanek going to throw down that bunker at the front because he doesn't have any other information other than my opponent has a gateway, a cybernetics core, and a gas geyser. Which means this could be anything from a 1-gate expand into a 4-gate. It is going to be the 1-gate expand, though, from Machination, most standard thing in the world, going up against the 1 Rax expand. Vanek doing something a little bit different, going into 4 barracks after this, rather than the traditional 3. Now, this does open up more timings where you have more units, and you can do a little bit more damage than with the 3 Rax. The 3 Rax has its own timings built into it, but those tend to be with your medevacs. With the 4 Rax, you can do it before your medevacs are out, and before your opponent's really able to respond. You see that SCV going to get picked off, and this Marine not looking too happy either, as is this one. A couple of these might get picked off. This Marine running for his life, he's not going to be able to escape the horse-like gait of this stalker. Ugh, says Mr. Marine. So Vanek down a couple of units early, and we can actually see that reflected in the supply, which is kind of weird. Our Protoss player up 6 supply a little bit early on, but not a big deal. And we see this is basically the Protoss version of the 1 Rax gasless expand, except that you have to take gas. But 1 gate into 3, and then we'll probably see, I imagine, a robotics facility added on before long. But we'll see where Machination wants to go. Again, there's a lot of timings available to both players that range from aggressive into just take a 3rd base. And that's one of the reasons why this matchup is kind of interesting, even though you tend to see the same unit compositions every game. It's just how people go about getting there that's kind of the interesting part. But you see a 4th gateway as well as the robotics facility added on for Machination, and I'm not sure about the state of the game at this point. So the games, while we present them in a certain order, weren't necessarily played in that order. Vanek going to put on some pressure. He's pulled a couple of SCVs to go with his Marines, and he'll take down the Zealot at the Watchtower basically for free. He might have lost a Marine there. It was actually the hurt Marine, poor guy. But this is going to be interesting. Force Field's going to be very important for Machination. He does have 3 sentries out, but he needs to be very careful with how he does this. One Marine going to move up, and he sees quite a few units up at the top. Another warping of Zealots, and Vanek actually going to very smartly just go home. Lost quite a bit of mining time from those 5 SCVs, and his timing with his 4 barracks just not quite going to hit exactly the time he wanted it. If his opponent was playing very greedy and going for a 3rd base, or even trying to go for early Colossus tech on, say, 2, maybe even 3 gates, that timing does a lot of damage. But as it is, seeing all the Zealots at the top of the ramp, very smart by Vanek just to go home. There's nothing wrong with going home and extending the game a little bit. So we'll see where he wants to go from there. Adding on add-ons. Looks like 3 tech labs and a reactor going to be the add-ons of choice. Starport nearly done, and the reactor for that as well. So we'll see some medevacs out before long, and we'll see if he wants to get aggressive with those drops instead of doing that sort of Marine SCV. It's not necessarily all in, but that Marine SCV attack. Machination, though, macroing very, very well. We see a pretty significant lead. 41 probes to 37 SCVs, so that's mostly an army supply, which is kind of weird for this stage of the game, for the Protoss to be that far ahead in army supply. This just means that he hasn't focused on his upgrades as much as a lot of other Protoss players have. But there's the robotics bay added on. No forge as of yet for those plus for the armor and the other upgrades. And these stalkers moving around, I believe he's worried about a Banshee right now. And that's kind of a normal worry. After seeing that kind of Marine SCV attack, the next thought, sort of, in terms of Terran cheesiness or that sort of thing, would be to make a Banshee. We see that's not on the way. Drops are also worrisome, and this is going to be spotted. Machination in full awareness of this army moving across the map, and we'll see how he wants to respond to that. He doesn't need to pull the stalkers back down to the bottom of the ramp fairly quickly to try and deal with this. He's going to take the probe out at the Watchtower, so a lot of advanced warning now for Machination. 86 supply to 106, and this is going to be, while it usually is a difficult attack to hold, that first Colossus is going to be out, and that just makes all the difference in the world for Machination in terms of defense. And we'll see where Vanek wants to go. He can just put on this pressure and then pick a couple of units up into the dropships and move them into the main. But we do see nice spread of just stuff from Machination. He's got an observer over here, got a pylon over here to spot for any shenanigans coming out. And Machination, after seeing these kind of failed aggression attempts, going to just expand to his 3rd base and play this out in a macro style. And I really like the way Machination has been playing out this game so far. Vanek, of course, has done a good job not putting on this pressure, because each time his army would be crushed, and that would just be the end of the game. So he's keeping himself alive by not putting on the pressure. Taking a couple of spare units out here at the Watchtower, always a good thing. There goes another Zealot. But for right now, Machination's position much better than Vanek's. We do see a couple more medevacs going to be added in. Still on only the 4 barracks right now is Vanek. His first engineering bay is done, so getting that +1 up, he's actually going to be a little bit ahead in the upgrades, I believe, as there's no forge, only 1 forge yet. But it hasn't been used. The Twilight Council is down as well. Again, hasn't been used. And another Zealot headed out to the Watchtower for Machination. That's going to be caught and killed again. And just picking up a couple of spare units. We do see him taking down the Destructible Rocks into his 3rd. But Machination again with a pretty big army supply lead still. 84 to 75. Worker supply lead maybe not as big as he'd hoped, with those mules going to be able to give the Terran player a slight advantage. In comes Vanek, though, going to go up into the 3rd base, and if he can get a decent spot for an engagement, he'll be okay against these Colossus. But there's 3 of them out right now, and that can be really devastating. Nice force fields cutting that army in half. 1 Colossus does fall, and we do see the army's been separated very nicely, so he's able to take a couple of these units for free. Vanek really needs to try and pick off that Colossus. It's doing so much damage to him. But we do see nicely done by Vanek. Really good micro so far. He's even splitting up these units. So he can come in for the flank and try and pick off the Colossus. It's going to have to retreat. There are more force fields actually catching some of these units. Vanek not really targeting anything in particular. The Zealot wall is gone now for Machination, but there's just not enough units here for Vanek to do any more damage. The Medevac's going to just leave and keep themselves alive, and that's cleaned up by Machination. Really nicely done. Vanek was in a good position. If he took all of his units and attacked the third, he could get that. That would have been a nice pickup, but in exchange for his army, he was able to trade a little bit better with the move that he did in splitting up his units, half on the ramp and half up by the third. So he whittled down his opponent's army a little bit more and didn't leave himself open for counterattacks. He lowered the Nexus's HP. He can come in and drop that later on and maybe get that with just kind of a spare drop. But now Vanek knows he's behind after seeing that third base. He throws down a third base of his own, which is nearly done, taking down destructible rocks between the second and third. And this is shaping up to be, this is a pretty highly game from both players. Both come out fantastically so far, I have to say. Vanek adding on armory so he can get his +2 upgrades. He's only at 1-0. Is there another? Yeah, there's apparently another engineering base somewhere. I'm just not seeing quite yet. Where is it? That's gonna bother. Oh, there it is. Wow, I'm blind. Okay, there's the engineering base. So he's going up to 2-1 very quickly, which actually gives him a little bit of an advantage on the Protoss player. +2 ground armor on the way for these Zealots, but no attack upgrade yet. I'm not sure exactly how that works out in terms of this matchup. I know a lot of the other matchups, but that's one I'm not entirely sure about. But we do see Machination getting up to that ideal mix of units that he wants to have. There's 3 Colossus and 5 Templar with his army, getting a Warp Prism out, making more and more probes. He just needs to add on a little bit more of a gateway core to this army, and he'll be in a very solid position. We see he's actually adding on more and more Templar. Those are mostly going to be for Archons, it looks like. But there's the Warp Prism for Machination. We see if he wants to use this aggressively or more defensively. You can use it to warp in units behind your push, or you can use it to start doing some harassment. We see, oh, a little sneaky proxy pylon for Machination hidden up in the third base, and Vanek's not going to be able to see that at all. Ooh. So this sets up a little bit of multi-pronged attackness from Machination. He can push in at the front, and if Vanek's able to defend there, he may have a little bit of trouble down here in the natural. Zealots being warped in, those will get in. A handful of units coming back to try and defend for Vanek, and this is actually about the appropriate number that needed to be pulled. Really well done by Vanek, splitting up his army. We do see the army supply lead just gigantically in favor of Machination, and here he comes into the front. Now, this does set up kind of a flanking opportunity for Vanek. If he can catch the Colossus, he'll be in a great spot. But we see this is not the place he wants to engage. Good force fields by Machination, able to separate a lot of this army. Flanking Marauders coming in. There's a gigantic storm going down on top of a lot of these units. Really, really hurt. One storm not so good. The second one fantastic, though, from Machination. Vanek forcing him back for the time being. All but one of the Colossus now are gone. There's still 2 Vikings remaining, so that should fall. But there's still so much energy left on these Templar. Another storm hits these bio units. Only Marauders left alive. A lot of these Medevacs injured too. Another storm going down, and it looks like Machination just going to kind of power through here. Reinforcements from Vanek not quite going to be enough. It looks like taking down a lot of these Zealots, but they are just surrounded in this little area. And there's the GG from Vanek, and Machination keeping the Killer Pikachus alive, now at 3-1. So we'll hit into Silver game number 2 right after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching CTL, casted by TC.Vanek. Holy crap, my bitrate went up to 700